This is about defending democracy. This is no longer Democrats versus Republicans. What do you want your kids to believe in? There must be give and take.
This is White Flag with Joe Walsh.
I found it. Look, I love ice cream, but I'm not 18 years old anymore, so I can't eat a lot of it. But I found it. I found a healthy ice cream alternative that actually tastes great. Sweet pea non-dairy ice cream, get this, it's made with chickpeas. I know, it tastes great. Tastes and feels like real ice cream. Look, I screwed around with soy-based and oat-based products. They all tasted like shit. Sweet pea made from chickpeas is the first healthy alternative I've found that I absolutely love. I'm in DC. I get sweet pea at Giant Foods. If you're in DC, Philly, Pennsylvania, go to Giant Food stores. If you're in New York City, go to Balducci or Key Foods. In San Francisco, go to Nugget. You will absolutely love this. It tastes great. Made with chickpeas. That's so cool. It tastes great.
Former Congressman Joe Walsh back with you. White Flag with Joe Walsh is the podcast. Every week I sit down with people who don't think like me because I find that to be a hell of a lot more interesting. Peter Strzok, I'm so happy to be sitting down with this young man today. You know the name, 26-year FBI and Army veteran. He was the Deputy Assistant Director of the FBI's Counterintelligence Division. He led the investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election. I don't know how much Peter is tweeting, but if you do want to follow him on Twitter, you should. Pete, last name, Strzok. By the way, everybody, and I'll plug this a couple times, Peter's got a great new podcast out there called Clean Up on Aisle 45, kind of tracking all the legal shenanigans still ongoing with Trump and all of his people. We'll get into that later. Peter, my friend, welcome.
Joe, thank you. It's great to talk with you. I don't know how differently we think, but maybe we think differently about some things. So we'll figure that out as we go. I think there's a lot of things we see completely eye to eye about. But
you and I are like best buds these days. That is an interesting question, Peter, because you've been an FBI guy your whole life, and I don't know for the life of me where you are politically. I suppose if you and I sat down and had a beer in a bar and went over issues, who knows where we'd stand. I want to start at kind of current news and events and then work our way back because you've been in the news, or stuff about you has been in the news, which I think is just fuck Trump. So you filed the defamation suit back in 2019, wrongful termination from the FBI. The Justice Department seems to be going out of their way to do anything to make Trump not be deposed. And then, Peter explained this to me. It came out a week or so ago that General Kelly said, Trump's former chief of staff, that Trump inquired as to whether the IRS could go after and look into you and Lisa Page back in the day. What's going on with, where are we at with your defamation suit and the Justice Department's effort to protect Trump?
Yeah, so it's crazy, and of course I'm limited in what I can say because I'm party to this ongoing lawsuit. But kind of going over the things that have been publicly filed by my team in the case, I sued both for the release of text messages, which was a violation of the Privacy Act, as well as wrongful termination, essentially that the Bureau didn't follow its procedures when they fired me, as well as the fact that it was politically motivated, stemming from Trump's desire to have me fired and all, everything that went into it. So this again was filed, almost 5 years ago. God. So this has been going on for a very long time. And what we're getting to the point is, building through discovery and a bunch of litigation back and forth, getting to the point of deposing. We deposed FBI Director Wray not too long ago and have been trying to depose Trump. And what's been interesting, and just a side note, so General Kelly, we had, have a affidavit or sworn statement from him essentially saying that while he was Trump's chief of staff, that he recurringly heard Trump talking about me, asking about whether or not the IRS and federal agencies could investigate me, his understanding that Trump wanted that done, that Trump wanted me fired, that Trump wanted my security clearance pulled, along with others, right? I mean, it was not just me, it was the whole, kind of set of folks, but relevant to the lawsuit, that Trump was asking for this to occur.
Yeah.
And that it wasn't just one occasion, it wasn't just two occasions. He had notes that he took on two occasions, and specifically noted Trump didn't like people taking notes because he thought those notes might be used against him, which, sounds like any good criminal does.
Yeah.
But in any event, in trying to get that Trump deposition, the Department of Justice has taken the position in this. I don't want to get into too legal a discussion, but there's something called an apex doctrine, which means that the head of any very large organization, whether it's a department head, a president, the CEO of a large organization, that they need to be insulated somewhat from, if you've got 50,000 employees, the guy in the mailroom, the guy working in the cafeteria can't, if all of those people were to suddenly sue saying, oh, the CEO or the president caused me to be fired or whatever, that this would grind their ability to do work to a halt. And the Department of Justice is taking the position, well, we need to protect the presidency. Not so much Trump, but we don't want every Tom, Dick, and Harry who is, an employee to be able to go and depose the president.
Right.
But what, again, and what frustrates me very much is time and time again, Trump has used the norms of the law, of organizations, of positions, and gone right up to the line and passed it and taken advantage of that. So, yes, I understand that in general you want to prevent President Obama or President Smith or President Jones from having some mail carrier sue them. But the reality in this case is Trump, tweeted about me scores of times, accused me of treason, demanded that I be fired, sued me.
No. Hey, Peter, we have a rule.
So bear with me.
We have a rule on the podcast. You never apologize for a dog barking, ever.
Okay.
So let me
grab the dog. I'm going to get him while he's...
He can interrupt us as much as he wants. I love that.
It's all...
Oh.
Max, so that's...
Give me a name. Give me a name, Peter.
Good. Max. This is Max. He's very men, but he carries himself like a Max. But in any event, so, DOJ has argued this apex doctrine. And of course, the crazy thing is, it in this case, Trump even had time to sue me personally after he left office. Had the little process server try and, couldn't find me eventually. But, for a person to have such time and animus to file a lawsuit against me, for DOJ then to turn around and say, oh, the apex doctrine says you can't depose him. It's like, well, the man has publicly claimed credit for my firing.
Right.
And so I think, in any event, so there was a lot of litigation at the district court level. We prevailed. And then the government just appealed it to the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, asking for something called, mandamus relief, essentially saying the district court got it wrong. I believe the law is on our side. I think it's righteous. I think we'll ultimately do it. But again, it is the takeaway from all this is, yet again, Trump taking advantage of the system. And God damn it, if DOJ is not playing into that and defending him in a way that, they're trying, in my opinion, trying so hard to not be political that they are in fact becoming political.
They're becoming political. Yeah. And that, Peter, that's fascinating, because that actually has been a great trick of Trump's throughout this. He's so outrageous that some of the institutions like the Justice Department want to be seen of as fair brokers, so they'll bend over the other way because they don't want to treat him as unique, but he is unique. It's a crazy dynamic. So this is just going to take more time then. So again.
Right. And we'll see. I mean, I don't know what the DC pacing and calendaring process is. Presumably if we win, depending on how far DOJ wants to take it, they can ask for because you get a 3-judge panel. If either party, I think, although my appellate law is very small in terms of expertise, either party, I think, on the adverse side of that ruling can appeal for what's called an en banc hearing, which is the entire DC circuit. And depending on which way that goes, appeal it to the Supreme Court. Now, the Supreme Court doesn't have to take it. Who knows whether they would or not. But again, if the goal by DOJ, and some of this I think is also a little bit of a fig leaf in my opinion, right? It's like, oh, we're going to argue we're protecting the institution of the presidency, but the reality is they're terrified about what Trump is going to say in the deposition.
Yeah.
Just because, anyway. But so leave that.
But you, my
put
friend,
all those.
Because again, we're like 4 years removed already. Your intent on seeing this all the way to the bitter end.
Yeah,
Good.
100%. I mean, look, if I'd be happy, like, the government saw the light with Andy McCabe and said, hey, look, you were totally screwed and we're going to settle, and essentially gave Andy everything he wanted. I mean, he was, terminated literally hours before he was eligible to retire. And they sat down and said, okay, look, that was wrong, and we're going to, reinstate you and, get, kind of expunge all this stuff from your record. So, if the government wants to eventually do that and settle, I hope they would. That's great. But
is there,
we'll see.
Is there any part of you that thinks they might?
That's a good question. Part of somewhere, sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the proposition of, a Trump deposition, certainly depending on what he says, I think there would be something there that would be, I think it's a strong case. I would not have brought it if I didn't think it was a strong case. So, I don't, but they seem, at this point, again, we've been litigating it for a long time. And again, for the people listening, all of you are paying for this team of 4 attorneys and their 2 to 3 supervisors for all this time. And that, paying for that to ultimately defend the bad acts of Trump, who has said, right, and there's been a reporting, that his team is trying to identify the people who are working for Jack Smith, so as soon as he takes office, he can fire all of them.
Bingo.
We know what he is going to do because he did it already, and he has made clear what he's going to do if he comes back into office. And whatever restrictions he felt, it'll be like Trump Unbound, right? I mean, it'll be, the crazy version of him running through a, MAGA field of daisies, like doing anything he wants. And the failure of, to your point, I think you're exactly right. People, there is a lack of understanding that what Trump is so unique that to approach it as we have to approach it as the presidency and the norms is wrongheaded, and we're going to pay a price for that.
Bingo.
And, we'll see.
Peter, you were not surprised, I'm assuming, when you learned what Kelly said in the reporting that he wanted the IRS to look into you. Trump did. That probably didn't surprise you at all.
No. And I mean, part of it was like, so the New York Times, I think Mike Schmidt in the New York Times had published something several months ago, essentially saying the same thing.
Yeah.
So my assumption is that he was either General Kelly or somebody close to him had provided that information. And I think, General Kelly wanted, my sense was, because he went on the record and put his name to saying that he wanted to say something. He wanted something in the record. So, it's not surprising. I mean, it's concerning, right? I mean, did I get like one of the what do they call it? The proctological exam of a tax audit like Director Comey and Andy did? No, but did they look at my taxes? I have no idea. And part of the other concerning thing was what Kelly said was the IRS or other federal agencies. Well, who is that, right? Is that DHS, the FBI? Who knows? And so, that sort of like question about like what he may or may not have ordered. And again, that's a purpose of the deposition, right?
Exactly.
That's why you need to talk to Trump. Did he have any odd conversation with the administrator of the DEA or something? So, no, it's not surprising, but it's, to be on the enemies list of a crazy, unbound president asking people to dig into your, stuff is,
Peter, do you, and don't answer this if you can't, because I used to wrestle with this. I don't anymore. Donald Trump is a horrible, evil person. I think he's a criminal. I think he's a traitor. I think he's a threat to this country. Do you think like there's like a purpose to what he's doing, or is he just kind of an emotional idiot who just responds to shit? And this is what he's done his whole life. He's just reflexive, and all he cares about is himself. Or do you think this is a plan? Like he's hell bent on becoming an authoritarian? I know a lot of people wrestle with that.
It's a great question. I mean, look, and I'm not a behavioral psychologist. Having said that, I spent 20 years plus as an agent, observing people and their motivations and their behavior. So I don't. My sense is there's not some master plan where he wants to become, the emperor of the world sort of thing. But I do think all those things that we see, I do think there is an impulsiveness, there is an insecurity, there is a desire for control, there is an entire career built up around, sort of fake promotion, and whether he's promoting something with Don King, whether he is trying to sell, license his name, whether he is dealing with, God knows who in the organized crime world to get properties built. All the things he has done have created an expertise in the crap that we see him doing. All the unstated, all the things Michael Cohen said, right? Behaving like a mob boss. He's not going to write anything that he can say. He's not going to say anything that he can kind of nod at you to do. I mean, that is learned behavior. And all of those things that he's done also have a wonderful intersect with the criminal world. I mean, if you're looking to launder money, whether you're a domestic criminal, whether you're an oligarch, whoever it is, you do things like, real estate licensing and all that. His entire world has, in my opinion, been sort of created this expertise that we see on display all the time. And I do think now there is, on top of his desire for power, there's an extraordinary fear that if he doesn't regain the presidency, that he's going to jail. And I'm certain that's terrifying. And so, talk about doubling down. I mean, the man already wanted to be president, but now there's this fear of incarceration, that God knows what he's going to do.
And everything you just said, Peter, all of that about him, combined with an utter ignorance of the rule of law, the Constitution, any of this stuff. I mean, just an utter ignorance of or respect for any of that. Look, I've always said, and correct me, rephrase this better. Every man and woman who goes to work for the FBI, they have their own. We're human. We all have our own political biases. We all have our ideas. We all have our philosophy. But every man and woman that goes to work for the FBI, generally everyone puts those to the side and they do their fucking job to protect this country. I believe that. But when he got elected, Peter, when this idiot got elected, even though I believe every man and woman at the FBI, they are solely focused on their job, protecting their country, they put their political thoughts to the side, there had to have been a little bit of you that just said, fuck, I'm going to do my job, but this guy, oh my God.
Yeah, no, I think that's well stated. I mean, it is true that every FBI employee, well, not every, but most employees have personal political opinions. It wasn't culturally. That's not something that was discussed. There was never sitting around the squad bay or in the unit. Oh, hey, did you see the news about some Senate race?
Yeah.
Politics just didn't come up at all. Now, having said that, it was clear that myself included, that everybody, typically, again, I shouldn't say everybody, the vast majority of FBI employees, certainly FBI agents, are very conservative. Skew Republican. Again, it wasn't talked about, but you can just tell the sense is. I mean, it is the nation's preeminent law enforcement organization. So when you think about law and order, the FBI is law and order, right? And so historically, I mean, growing up, when we grew up, that was by and large. When you thought about the party of law and order, you thought about the Republican Party. I mean, now everything's upside down. But that was, but no. So yes, I think there was concern. I think, regardless of what you think politically, I think then you step aside and you say, okay, professionally, what do you think as a national security professional, as a counterintelligence professional? I think all the things that we saw Trump doing in 2015 and 2016, encouraging Russia to hack Hillary Clinton's emails, standing up there next to, once he was in the presidency, standing next to Vladimir Putin and saying he trusted him ahead of the U.S.'s, intelligence organizations, which was a shocking statement. All the things prior to the presidency, saying he had no business dealings in Moscow with Russia when Michael Cohen was pursuing at that moment, Trump Towers in Moscow, creating leverage, saying weird things to either Hannity or Tucker Carlson about Montenegro and not being sure whether or not that as president he would honor the NATO mutual defense obligations. I mean, there were just all these things that, again, setting aside whatever you think personally, as a national security perspective or professional looking at that, I don't think there's anybody in the intelligence community who would look at those statements and behaviors and not be concerned about it, because it did, all those things represented a potential threat to national security. And then, of course, those were borne out. Everything he did during the presidency. I mean, this appalling handling after the presidency of the classified information of Mar-a-Lago. And to your, what you were saying earlier, not only does he not have a concept of what law and order and the criminal justice system is in the Constitution, his concept of national security is literally my button is bigger than Kim Jong-un. Yeah. It's like, well, no, I have no expectation or belief that Trump is capable of placing the national security of the United States ahead of his own personal interests.
Bingo.
Did not during his presidency, does not right now, and will not. And it is quite clear and obvious through repeated behavior that he should never come anywhere close to classified information again, that he should never be in a position to control the thousands of nuclear weapons in our nation's arsenal, that he should not be in a position of deciding when and where to put our servicemen and women in harm's way. And yet here we are. And he's gonna be the Republican.
Peter, it's auto-fucking-matic. It's automatic.
There is no, this entire race that everybody else is gaming for second place in the hope that somehow either he has too many hamburgers and keels over.
They're all waiting.
Right. And none of them, and they all know they can't challenge him.
Yes.
It is just trying to position themselves so if something happens, whatever that is, and Joe, he can go to trial, be convicted, go to jail, and he's still going to run, and he likely will get, 30 at a minimum, 30% of the vote out there from jail if it came to that.
Where are you, though none of us know, Jack Smith and say just the Jan 6 investigation? Do you think an indictment? Do you expect an indictment? Who knows?
It's tough. I don't know.
Yeah.
I've seen some folks, saying, oh, something is coming soon because he knows he has to act soon. I don't know about that. I mean, the thing that is, Jack Smith and his team are doing exactly what they should, that we are not seeing leaks. We don't know what they have. To the extent we hear and see things, it's because people who have been interviewed or people who show up at the grand jury or their attorneys are coming out and talking to the press about it. There's, I'm certain, a huge amount of information that none of us know that Jack Smith and his team have. But unlike from an investigator's perspective, the beauty about Mar-a-Lago and the classified documents is it's a very simple story, right? You have a couple of people, Trump and Walton Nauta. Maybe you have a couple other people who may or may not have exposure. But if you're trying to investigate it, it's a nice bound area to investigate. If you're trying to explain it to a jury or to the public, it's very easy to kind of talk about. January 6th gets really, really hard.
Yeah.
If you start talking about all the fake electoral slates, if you start talking about the planning for violence, if you start talking about the run-up and all the machinations within DOJ and who knew what and whether attorneys were, he can say, well, I was relying on advice of counsel, even if that was crappy advice. I was still relying on what my attorneys told me that it gets really complex. Now, there may be things like they've got him dead to rights and we don't know it, because there's documentary records of him, saying, oh, I know I lost, but screw it. Let's try and steal.
Yeah, Peter, I think you're right. I also believe the Georgia case is pretty cut and dry too, but we'll see. I've always wanted to ask you this question. You dedicated your life to serving this country. The Army, all those years in the FBI, you did your job 10, 15 years ago. Nobody outside of you and your department and your job knew who you were. And then all of a sudden, in a nanosecond in 2017 or so, thereabouts, you are thrust into the public eye because of what that asshole did. That transition, Peter, of being a good, loyal, behind-the-scenes servant, and then all of a sudden, you and your face and your name are out there in the fucking political world. What was that like?
It was horrible.
Oh,
And I can say that now. Like for years, I was like, whether processing it or whatever it was, it was hard to kind of say with honesty
yeah.
that, yeah, it was terrible. Again, as you pointed out, certainly as a counterintelligence professional, the goal, like the affirmative effort to stay in the shadows, to not be
Yeah.
public. I mean, my goal was to retire, and there's somebody an analyst in Moscow and an analyst in Beijing, and all they had on an org chart was a name, and they didn't even have a picture, and they were all swearing, and their
Yeah.
boss saying, "Why the hell can't you who is this guy? Why don't we know about him?" I mean, that was the goal. But no, when you get it was the strangest thing is it you're suddenly placed into a role that you don't have the toolkit to deal with.
Bingo.
It is not, I don't, if you are in the public eye, typically it's because you're super famous and wealthy. You're captain of industry, or you're a movie star or sports star, and you got a ton of money, and you can pay for people to manage your personal security, and you can pay for people to manage your media exposure, and you can go somewhere and pay for a nice place to go in a gated community where people aren't going to show up at your house, and all that's taken care of. Or you're in the political process where you have whatever party you are, you've got that party behind you to defend you. I didn't have, and there were a bunch of us who were thrust into that sort of environment. I didn't have any ability to do that, right? I'm not a wealthy man. I'm on a government salary. I don't have, Republicans, had it out for me. Democrats didn't particularly want to defend me. And so you have all this, you're standing out there and
naked.
And it's like, I once told somebody a long time ago, the analogy of like, suddenly like, I don't know anything about sailing. And all of a sudden I'm on a sailboat saying, what the hell am I supposed to do? And I keep getting knocked off into the water, and people saying, oh, damn, that's horrible. You're knocked into a water, and you keep getting knocked into the water enough that eventually people are like, well, maybe you're supposed to be in the water. And no, this is just, there's nothing. So perfect. It was terrible. And it's to have, and it was so multifaceted. It was Trump, the president, saying personal things about me. It was all his enablers in Congress repeatedly saying things about me. It was the media ecosystem, almost like coordinated.
His enablers on Fox News, Peter. Yeah.
Right. And so you have all from the media to Congress to the president. It is this nonstop barrage of attack. And again, you're sitting there like my whole toolkit of 6 years in the Army and then in DoD, like I've got tools, right? I've got offensive tools, I got defensive tools, but nothing for this environment. It's an alien environment. And it was rough. And it was rough on my family. I mean, and I don't want to get into too many details about that, but when it isn't particularly on the physical threat side.
Yeah.
That isn't limited, things, people showing up at the house, letters showing up at the house, packages showing. I mean, it isn't just you, and the impact, and I think half the people, it wasn't, do half of Congress or Hannity or Tucker Carlson have personal animus to me? Maybe some of them do, but for the most part, I'm like this. Yeah. I'm a tool. I'm a thing to try and shoehorn a political message into. But what nobody understands is there's a goddamn whole world of real people who are attached to that. And their audience, their listeners, that crazy fringe, then intersects with it. And that it was tough.
I think, Peter, that's so important for everybody listening to us to understand. I come from that political world. So I was in that world. I was used to that world. So when I got off my ass and did something crazy like challenged Trump in the primary in 20, I knew I knew what I was going to get, and I had the tools to deal with that. Someone like you who comes from the antithesis of that world. And Peter, look, we've all anybody who opposes Trump publicly, life is hell. But for those 2 or 3 years there, Peter, you were, the barrage that you took was just off the charts. It must have felt overwhelming at times.
Yeah, For sure it was. I mean, look, there is, I think, a great deal of, both upbringing, but certainly in the Army and the FBI, a great deal of resiliency that, comes from that. But it was hard. Again, just because it is not anything that I was, this sort of involuntary celebrity.
Yeah.
And and there were some people who were like, particularly after, it was tough before my congressional testimony.
Yeah.
There weren't a lot of defenders, but at least, congressional testimony in a way that was liberating to be able to sit there and say, no, okay, I'm here with the facts. Let's rebut all of this nonsense BS attack point after point. And then at least there are some people who are like, hey, right on. That guy got up there. He had control, he understood what happened. He explained it clearly. It really looks like, Trump is actually a threat to national security. The FBI actually did act in a legitimate way. So at least some defenders started, coming along. But there were times where it was very hard. But at some point too, there is, when you, and I'm going to not come up with I think it was a Russian writer. At some point, when you strip everything away, that's almost empowering because you don't have anything left to lose.
Bingo.
And so when you are so constantly under attack, it's like, all right, well, come on. What else? What reason do I have anymore not to stand up and fight? Because everything has been stripped away. So but Joe, it's hard. And I would tell, anybody not even, this is kind of a weird, unique position, but any sort of adversity is tough. And there are times where all you've got at the end of the day is your belief in yourself. And it's hard sometimes. And you just got to, get one foot in front of the other for that day, week, month, whatever it is. And, you'll get through it. But
Peter, did you think
it was hard?
Did you think any of this was going to hit you? Like once you led the investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election, in that role, was there a part of you that thought, okay, this could get political, my name could get out there? I mean, that's a big deal what you were doing, looking into.
Yeah, not like this. I mean, I anticipated it would be scrutinized.
Yeah.
And that there would be political actors who were both happy about it and angry about it.
Yeah.
But not anything like this. And that's the thing too, is like, all the things about like, people say, oh, well, what was done or not done. It's like there's this idea in the law something is foreseen or foreseeable, right? That if you do something and that when you're doing it that there might be a consequence.
Yeah.
The anticipation of Donald Trump's actions and behavior, nobody understood that.
No.
And so it's like, well, you all did this, or you personally did this, or shouldn't have done that. It's like, oh, okay, agreed. But in a normal world where Donald Trump isn't president, the aftermath of those investigations looks nothing like it did. So, no.
That's what
I
Peter. That's what
I didn't.
And that's what so pisses me off. Like I know you knew in real time, and I knew in real time. It's easy now to take shots 4, 5, 6 years later. Russia fucked with our election. It's something we'd never seen before in 16. Of course, we had to look into it. And of course, mistakes were going to be made. But damn it, it needed to be looked into. I just, for the life of me, don't understand why damn near every American doesn't understand that. It was unprecedented what they did.
Agreed. And I don't get at the thing that I never, when people are like, wheel out all the nonsense talking points. And, and the problem is, it takes you 5 times longer to rebut it than it does to make the allegation. But at the end of the day, there are two things where it's like, okay, if there's this conspiracy about Donald Trump, explain to me why the FBI made repeated comments about investigations of Hillary Clinton prior to the election, while at the same time we were investigating Donald Trump, and that never got out.
Never got out.
If there was a plot for me to undermine his candidacy, any one of us could have caused that information to come out, and given how close it was and given all the shit swirling, an FBI investigation about Russian connections to elements of Trump's campaign and the fact that, there was this offer of assistance made, if that got out part of the election, it would have been devastating, but it didn't.
Peter,
so how do you explain that?
I don't know.
Plot, right?
And I don't know what you have or haven't said. I don't know what you can or can't say about Comey, but that's a great point. I mean, Comey comes out 10, 12, 14 days before the 2016 election and announces the reinvestigation into Hillary. My God, I've looked at the numbers. That devastated Hillary politically. And to your point, we're investigating Trump and Russia at the time and nobody says shit about it.
Yeah. That's absolutely right. And look, I mean, I've gone round and round about, I don't did the FBI change the result of the election? And I think it probably did. I mean, the weird thing is there's no one determinative thing, right? Do I think that Russia's actions caused a change in the result of the election? Yes, I did. Do I think that the Clinton campaign's utter lack of attention to Michigan, Wisconsin,
Michigan,
Pennsylvania, because they believed that was in the bag and let's go for a reach and try and get Arizona. Did that influence the result of the election? Yes, it did. So, all these different things, there's no one single determinative thing in the outcome of the election. But I do think, that was there. And again, to your point, the FBI's actions were to the detriment of Clinton and to the benefit of Trump. And so you can't argue with, I can't countenance these arguments that there was some sort of plot. And then the other thing, what you said, what else was the FBI supposed to do?
Yeah.
What does the taxpayer want? If the information comes in, as it did from, I can now say, because John Durham declassified it, the Australian ambassador, the high commissioner in London, who used to be the foreign minister, right, a reputable, long-term government, high-level government employee comes and says, we had this conversation with a named advisor to the Trump campaign who said that Russia had made this offer of assistance, that they had information damaging to Clinton and Obama, and they offered to coordinate its release. And then it happened.
Yeah.
Exactly what this Trump advisor says occurs. How? And that information makes its way to the FBI. What single American would want the FBI just to ignore that?
Yeah.
Who? And if you believe that, why? How is that okay in any possible world?
You're right. We were attacked, but then Trump got elected and Trump said, fuck it. And then all of Trump's supporters said, fuck it. Do you have a concise, clear answer, Peter, as to why Comey publicly announced that Hillary reinvestigation right before the election?
Yes, I think so, because once he made the announcement on July 5th that we had closed the investigation and not brought charges and told Congress about that, it created the sort of obligation that, because we had notified Congress before, some expectation about why, you reopened this, but you didn't tell us. Well, you didn't tell us because you were looking to, help Clinton. So if you want to think of it as, as a old Irish Catholic guy, presumably, the original sin was that July 5th statement.
Yeah, exactly.
And, I understand, I think, Comey's reasons for doing it, in retrospect, whether or not that was, I know a lot of people believe that wasn't a good idea, but that's the thing that then causes these subsequent obligations. And again, it wasn't the announcement in that, I think it was 10 days, right before the election. That was not a public announcement. That was a notification to Congress. And of course, Congress, whoever it was,
thank you. Okay.
Jason Chaffetz, whoever runs out and literally takes it off the fax machine and takes it over to the Fox News reporter in the media bullpen.
That's right.
So that announcement was not a public one in October, November. That was a notification to Congress, which again, everybody knew Congress was going to make it public, but it was a little different than the July, because July was clearly a public statement.
Two questions that I've more specific questions I've always wanted to ask you. By the way, your 2020 book was just fantastic. Compromised: Counterintelligence and the Threat of Donald J. Trump. In that book, Peter, you talk about how the FBI opened a counterintelligence investigation into Trump May of 2017 after Trump fires Comey. Concerns about Trump's financial entanglements with Russia. And then Rosenstein curtails that. I was just confused about this. The understanding was that the Mueller investigation was going to look into that, but then it never really got looked into. I've always wondered about that.
Yeah, and that's a really concerning thing that I don't have an answer for. I
Yeah.
mean, we did open that case, right? And what people, again, one of the BS talking points is, oh, the FBI opened a case on Trump. And no, we didn't, not until much later in 2017. There were cases about specific people on the campaign, but not about Trump, not about the campaign, not about the administration. When that case was opened in May, shortly before Mueller was appointed, then, Comey had been fired. Andy McCabe was the acting director. This case was opened. We decided all these things were moving over to Mueller's team. In conversations I had with Andy and my boss, the head of the counterintelligence division, and others, the understanding was this counterintelligence case, which is separate from investigate crimes and build a criminal case, right? There are no elements of a crime of a counterintelligence case. The idea is you go out and you look at foreign influence. You look at foreign entanglements. You look at whether or not there are people who are agents or intelligence officers who have been inserted into the orbit of Trump and those people. There are a whole host of things. But my understanding of my job was to do that within the Mueller team with the FBI resources. And yes, Mueller's job was to look at violations of law.
Yeah.
But that as part of the FBI's participation in that, we would also be doing that counterintelligence case. That was my understanding, what I was setting out to do. Andy has said after this that his understanding was, yes, absolutely, that was going to be done.
That's what I thought.
At some point, I'm removed, and it sounds like that just stopped.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. I don't know how much discussion was there. I know that I can envision a scenario where Rod Rosenstein would say, because if you're going to do a counterintelligence look, you need a lot of financial information. You need a lot of very detailed information that at some point I can see Rod Rosenstein saying, no, I don't, that is getting too invasive. And, that's a policy debate. There's a lot of, I can see a variety of arguments within that discussion, but I don't know if that occurred. So
Peter,
I don't know.
I don't know if you can answer this. I don't know how you'll answer this, but again, I'm not you. I'm not an expert. I'm not an FBI guy. I'm not a lawyer. I'm just an ex-politician. Like, I've always thought Trump is just entangled financially with Russia up to the fucking wazoo. What can you speak to that? Like, I've always thought there's something. Russia's got something financial behind him, and that's why he's a puppet for Putin and all the rest. You've heard it all.
Right, I think that's right. Look, I don't think he's some sort of Manchurian candidate where he's secretly getting direction from the Russian intelligence services, or like when he meets with Vladimir Putin and tells the translator to go away, and it's just the two of them, that Vladimir hands him a secret list of like, here are all the classified documents I want.
Damn,
I don't think that's what's going on. The scary part is, like, look, as unlikely as that is or was, we couldn't exclude it, right?
Exactly.
So, part of the thing you do as an investigator is you look at risk, right? You look at what's the worst case scenario, what's the best case scenario, and at least you put a left and right limit on what your investigation is. But the worst limit is couldn't exclude that there's some sort of witting interaction with the government of Russia, which was horrible and terrifying and remains horrifying. But I do think, and I agree with you, that I think the most significant role in any sort of leverage that not only Russia, but any number of other foreign nations have over Donald Trump are financial entanglements.
Yeah.
They are the things, when you get Eric, I think it was Eric and not Don Jr., but when they sit there saying, a disproportionate amount of our real estate holdings are owned by Russian interests and Russian money.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? That a lot of that isn't going to be dirty money, is going to be potentially, laundered illicit money. All of those things, when you are so reliant on that for your business holdings and any sort of liquidity, that creates leverage. And particularly when you start denying it, right? That was so egregious. Like, if he wants to make Trump Tower Moscow, who gives a damn? The problem was that he was lying about it. The problem was that he was saying, I have no interest. Literally at the moment,
while he's running for president.
And so that gives anybody in Russia who know it, gives it leverage over him. And then you continue, look at all the money from the Saudis that went into Jared's investment fund.
Yeah.
Look at all the Saudi sovereign wealth fund money going into Live Golf and all the events that they're holding at Trump golf properties. this is, and so I agree with you that the primary source of leverage is a financial one. And again, I don't think that's limited to Russia. And that's, hugely problematic. Is he also motivated by like a desire for authoritarian control and an admiration for authority? And he's like looking at Duterte just executing drug dealers? Sure. That, Kim Jong-un gets nice parades every year. Sure. That is there. I think that need for affirmation, whatever, leave it to the psychologist to say, mommy didn't protect him from daddy's rage enough, or whatever the hell causes that sort of need for adulation and control. But, that's certainly present. Susceptibility to flattery is certainly present. But again, the financial entanglements in my mind are the top of this vulnerability list.
I get great joy in doing this. Nothing pisses off my former friends and supporters on the right more than when I say there was collusion. Every month or two, I'll just tweet that out. By the way, there was collusion in 2016. Peter, am I wrong? Like I always say, there was collusion between Russia and the Trump campaign. It just never rose to the level of a formal conspiracy. Is that kind of the
100%.
Gist? Okay.
Yeah. 100% there was. And that, and you're right, there's not a crime of collusion, right? So that becomes the a Rorschach test of what does collusion look like. But when you have, and Mueller said, kind of I'm going to butcher the words, but essentially the Russians wanted to help Trump. They did help Trump. The Trump campaign knew that they were trying to help and happily accepted it. I mean, that is, when you have people showing up, at Trump Tower, that Rob Goldstone or whatever that guy's name was is saying, hey, these Russians have dirt on Hillary, and they're, taking that meeting in Trump Tower, and Jared's there, and Manafort's there, and Don Jr.'s there. That the whole you're accepting. How do you not define that as
bingo
collusion?
Exactly.
When and you're out there on the campaign trail, singing the praises of WikiLeaks.
Yeah.
That there's actively reporting saying, first from private entities and ultimately from the U.S. government itself saying this material was hacked and stolen by the government of Russia and released to the intermediaries, some direct sort of cutouts for the government of Russia, like DC Leaks and Guccifer 2.0, and some sort of allegedly laundered through WikiLeaks. When when that's being said and you're actively encouraging that and highlighting that, how is that not... You're praising a foreign government essentially for hacking your rival, stealing their information, and then releasing it. This isn't some Steve Bannon production. This is Vladimir Putin's Russia.
Damn you, Peter Strzok. Damn you. See, this is, and I know Robert Mueller's a good man, but I'll always remember the report comes out. He's testifying in front of Congress. I know he's a good man and he's dedicated his life to this country. But maybe it was just because he was too old. If he had communicated what you just communicated there, because then the lie of no collusion came out because Mueller just seemed incapable of communicating what you said. It's so obvious to me. Oh, that makes, and then obviously, Bill Barr fucked everything up too, but I wish Mueller had communicated what you just communicated.
Yeah, but he never would have. I mean, look, it was clear that, he's not, he is, he's the, he's Director Mueller, right? I mean, former Marine, long time prosecutor. You don't, when you say something, you speak through indictments or complaints. You don't make off the cuff commentary. I mean, he was not, and then, and again, he's not, my experience was, there are a lot of people saying, oh, is he, the setting of going into Congress where each member has 5 minutes, half the time they're pontificating. The other half they're asking leading questions that you're trying to rebut. It was just not to have that sort of conversation. You either need a different format and or a different person to convey that. And you're right. And but that time Barr had already
it was cake. The cake was baked. Yeah.
And watching him try and rechrome his image now so he can go get a partnership at some law firm. It's like, go to hell. I mean, one of the true villains of the Trump presidency was Bill Barr.
Explain that.
The things
Peter,
he did
explain
to
that.
destroy.
Explain that.
The things that he did to destroy the apolitical behavior of the Department of Justice, the things that he did to miscast, and I know, talking to people on the team, that I'm still in touch with, the shock and fury amongst the special counsel group when Barr released that totally misleading statement, and people don't understand. Like, Director, Special Counsel Mueller went on paper essentially saying this is incorrect, this mistake. Again, to the extent that people are like, oh, whatever. No. If you understand Bob Mueller, just like talking about his personality, what he wouldn't say. The act of going on paper to tell the Attorney General you mischaracterized the report.
It's a big deal.
If you have like the decoder sheet to watch that action, that's like a huge red flag. But of course, people don't have that decoder sheet. So when you look at what Bill Barr did, misleading the nation on what Mueller's work did, when you look at what Bill Barr did to undo the prosecution of Mike Flynn, to just totally drop the sentencing for Roger Stone, when you look at his appointment of everybody from John Huber to then Jeff Jensen to then John Durham, essentially not only to help get Trump's allies off the hook, but then literally weaponizing government.
Yes.
That's what John Durham, go investigate the people who did the investigation.
Bingo.
That was all under Barr's watch. And so how, and just the repeated, the amount of sycophancy between Barr and his actions and the president's wishes are something that I hope the history books never forget and never minimize.
Peter, I'm really glad you said that, and I love the way you said that, and I love the way you spelled it out, because I agree with it, but I couldn't spell it out like you could. Bill Barr, to me, is one of the greatest villains of the Trump years. I love the way you said that, and you're absolutely right. I mean, I was in Congress when Eric Holder was the Attorney General under Trump, and Holder did some things I had issues with, but my side went crazy, right, with how political Holder was. Holder couldn't carry a candle to how political Bill Barr was with that office. He was like Trump's personal lawyer.
Yep, absolutely right. I agree. I mean, AG Holder, or Eric Holder as AG, was a very political AG. And that was, I agree with that. And I think there are some things that I think looking at it, I can certainly see, in the political realm and the general population kind of saying, is this, where is this taking DOJ? Is this a place that we want DOJ doing certain things? But again, it's everything. Trump broke the mold. Trump, every single norm he shattered. And so all of these, and the problem is every organization, I don't care if it's an executive branch department or agency, I don't care if it's Congress, I don't care if it's courts, all of those entities have over generations developed norms of behavior when it comes to interacting with the president. And then suddenly you get Trump, who is so sui generis, so unlike any other president, that none of these entities know how to deal with it. They don't know how to respond. They don't know how to defend themselves. And so not only do you have this sort of like organizational, how the hell do we deal with this? All the personal attacks make it not just an organizational problem, they make it a personal problem. So if you're in the FBI and a senior leader trying to figure out how do I defend the FBI, that's one question. But then you also have to decide, how do I defend myself?
Yeah.
Because if I go out and I do something to try and defend the FBI, all of a sudden Trump turns his ire on me or fires me. It's not just an organizational issue, it's a personal issue.
Yeah.
Now multiply that by the Department of Defense, the Department of Homeland Security, DEA, Treasury, every single senator, congressman, all these courts, nobody knew how to respond. And Trump just maximized that chaos.
And Peter, to your point on Barr, he is out there trying to refurbish his image, but he has said publicly, if Trump is the nominee, I'll vote for him.
How crazy is that?
Well,
how crazy is that?
That's what most of them now, most Republicans, that's still what they say. And it's wrong. It's just wrong. If you think he's unfit, then you can't support him. End of story. Let me wrap with you. I want to get into 3 other questions with you, and then I've so appreciated your time. I know you can't say anything about your firing. You were fired because Trump demanded it, period. End of story. And I hope that ultimately you prevail on all of that. Peter, were there any mistakes you made before the firing? And then were there any mistakes you made after the firing? Do any jump out at you?
I mean, look, there are certainly things in my personal life that I wish I had done differently. I
We
don't
all of
think
us.
Professionally, I mean, look, what people need to understand is the investigation of Clinton and her use of a private email server was really well done, was exceptionally
Yes.
well done. Great set of investigators, thorough investigation.
And by the way,
Done
Peter,
quickly.
for everybody listening to us, who led that investigation?
So, yeah, a
Thank
partner
you.
and I did. I had an
Thank you.
analyst, and he and I
Thank you.
led that. I, the Crossfire investigation, much larger
Yeah.
case. There were some things there was a problem with a FISA on an individual that, yeah, again, this is layers lower, but there were things there that occurred that should not have occurred. And in retrospect, putting more of my personal attention on that. I mean, it was not an area where should, but somebody, having more attention on that and correcting those issues is certainly something that I would have done. But broadly, no. Broadly, professionally, I would do every single one of those things again. We were right to open the case. We were right to do it in the way we did. We were right to look at the individual. I mean, look at the results speak for themselves, right? Conviction of Mike Flynn, conviction of George Papadopoulos, conviction of Paul Manafort, conviction of Roger Stone, conviction of Michael Cohen, conviction of Bill or Gates, whatever the hell his first name is. But
Gates,
all these people that we open cases on are felons now. So
Bingo.
of course I would do those things again. After the fact, it's hard to say. I mean, probably not. I mean, there was a time where, that initial shock after the publicity and after being fired. The analogy I use is just like, they talk about, in the military, if you're in an ambush, the goal is to get off the X, right? Like every weapon, everything is pointed at wherever you happen to be in the car or whatever it is, and the one thing you want to do is get off that spot where all the fire is being directed.
Yeah.
And so that sort of retreat, I just wanted to get me and my family out of the spotlight, and it ended up not being possible.
Yeah.
So I guess, looking back, if I could talk to me in the spring and summer of 2018, it would probably be, hey, look, this is not going to end, and you might as well lean forward into it rather than waiting, because it took a little while before I said, fuck it,
it did take a while.
I'm not going to escape this, so I might as well lean into it and
Peter,
that's
the only thing,
and help in the attack.
That's the only thing I thought of. I thought as you were going through it and we didn't know each other, I thought I wanted to sit down with you, and I wish I knew you then. And that would have been my advice. I would have said, fuck it, Peter, lean into it, man.
But for sure. And it's just, it's tough to know because, you don't know. It's like, well, is there a chance this is going to go away? And if it is, great, then let it go away, because that would have been preferable. But it didn't.
A couple more before you're gone. Yesterday, you and I saw Christopher Wray up on Capitol Hill testifying. And again, my former party is just, I thought they acted like fucking lunatics in that hearing. And it's not fringe anymore to say that it's GOP fringe to defund or abolish the FBI. I mean, I'm hearing mainstream Republicans say that. What's your thought on the Republican Party, the FBI, how Wray did yesterday? What's your overall take?
Oh, it's insanity on the part of the Republicans. I mean, I don't know what you replace the FBI with. I think the only reason they're saying it is because they want the investigations of Trump to stop. That's it. That's the only reason. If the FBI comes out and Hunter Biden is indicted for something else, that they're going to be cheering that went on. So this has nothing to do with the FBI. Everything to do with protecting Trump. It was good, I thought. I think Director Wray demonstrated a certain hardness and aggressiveness that I have not seen from him before now. It is important when the FBI is attacked that you have the leadership of the FBI in particular, or even DOJ, out there defending them vocally. I wish what we saw a little bit from Director Wray we had seen in 2018.
Bingo.
In 2019.
Bingo.
Because then I think you nip some of these BS narratives in the bud. But for him to say in no certain terms to Republican members of Congress, to the American people, to the FBI workforce, this is baloney, it's nonsense, that's important. And I'm glad he's doing it, finally. It's kind of like, so on the one hand, it's like, I'm glad you're doing it. On the other hand, where has this been for the past 5 years? But welcome, we'll take it. And so, cynically, do I think part of this is he's more than happy to defend the things that occurred on his watch?
Exactly.
And he's not going to spend an ounce of political capital on anything that happened prior to his, his tenure. I think that's quite possibly a motive there, but good. It was good. I was glad to see flashes of anger and indignation. And I think that's, it's necessary. The Republican Party's gone crazy.
Oh.
They have gone crazy.
Well, when you are a cult and your reason for existence is obedience to the leader, well, then, fuck democracy, as we saw on January 6th, fuck the rule of law, fuck the FBI, you have to do it. That's the position you have to take. It is frightening. Only answer this if there's something right there in front of mind. If I made you director of the FBI tomorrow, is there one reform, big or small, that you've been thinking, boom, I would do that in a heartbeat? And don't answer it if there's not one right there.
Now, we've got to get a handle on what the domestic terrorism program looks like, particularly when you start talking about gathering intelligence, looking at social media. It's clear to me that January 6th was a massive failure. I think some of that is implicit bias, right? If the people on January 6th were brown-skinned or dark-skinned, there would have been a radically different response. Setting that aside, I think there are real questions about the FBI's monitoring of political speech when that political speech starts turning into violent, anti-democratic speech.
Yeah.
And there's a debate that is much larger than the FBI that needs to go on. But if the sort of authoritarian MAGA movement continues, there's the potential for violence is real. Agreed. And we got to figure out what role we want the federal government to play.
Bingo.
In that issue.
Perfectly put. Let me ask you about your podcast before I ask you my final big picture question. Clean Up on Aisle 45. What is it? Tell me what it's all about.
Yeah, so it's a podcast that I co-host with Allison Gill, looking at all of the criminal things that continue to come out of the Trump presidency. So whether that is Trump's cases in New York, I think we'll very soon see an indictment in Georgia. I expect to see him indicted. Whether it is Steve Bannon's trials or Peter Navarro's trials or Rudy's disbarment, all the things, all the criminality in and around Trump that are continuing, kind of talking about that and tracking it. So, if you want to tune in and say, okay, what is going on with Rudy, right? I heard he was, recommended to be disbarred, and yes, so it's kind of a very broad look at all of that.
Clean Up on Aisle 45. Everybody check it out. Weekly podcast. Peter, last question. And again, I think I mentioned this to you a while ago. I'm a dark Irishman. I worry about America. I worry about the American experiment. I worried about it when I was in Congress way before Trump. I'm slightly bearish on whether we can keep this experiment together. Peter Strzok, are you bearish or bullish on the American experiment, my friend?
I think bearish in the short term. I think we have had a period of extended prosperity that have allowed petty grievances to dominate and come to the forefront of our political discourse. I think we are, along the bearish bent, I think we are barreling towards massive problems on the climate change front, massive problems from a geopolitical standpoint, potentially in the world, that I think when you have a overwhelming threat that has a tendency to bring people together. And so maybe maybe the sea levels, eradicating, thousands of square miles of our coast will cause our nation to come together. But I am probably more bearish than bullish.
I love, hey, you don't need to explain or justify. I just wanted your gut answer. Peter Strzok. Peter, I'm going to say two things here as we close. Fuck the haters. Thank you so much, my friend, for your service to this country.
Thank you.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you. Thanks. I appreciate that.
Boom.
Thank you for listening. Remember to listen, share, and follow White Flag with Joe Walsh on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere great podcasts are found. And be sure to leave a 5-star review. This has been White Flag with Joe Walsh.